Mr. Secretary, thank you so much for joining Alarabiya and welcome to Riyadh.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Walk me through the discussions that you've had today with His Royal Highness, the Minister of Energy. There's been a great focus on nuclear.
Yeah, well, there's been dialogues across the energy spectrum. We've talked oil, we've talked natural gas, we've talked solar, we've talked energy storage, we've talked moving water, we've talked industry, but certainly a good chunk about nuclear as well.
And you're anticipating that you'll be signing an MOU in the coming months on that?
Well, I think in the short run, we'll sign a broader agreement about cooperation across the energy space in partnerships, in investments, in investigations. Nuclear is certainly one of those areas. To get a specific agreement to partner on commercial nuclear development in Saudi Arabia, that'll take a little bit longer. That'll be months, not weeks.
But you're going to get there.
I think it's likely we will.
Now, does that require that the Saudis sign a 1-2-3 agreement with the United States?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that won't happen without that agreement being
Correct.
signed.
Correct. Yeah, we'll need a 1-2-3 agreement and a broader, specific framework for how we're going to cooperate together and how things will work. But based on the discussion so far and where we stand, I think it's likely we get there.
Excellent. When you think about what happens next in the energy field, specifically oil, a lot of conversations about what these lower oil prices are going to do to Saudi Arabia's ability, not just to project influence abroad, but also to build here at home. What is your timeline for how long these oil prices are going to be as low as they are today?
Oh, I can't predict oil prices, that's for sure. But oil prices are this is people looking ahead in the marketplace. And I think what you're seeing today is you're seeing reflected in the oil price, probably an overly large concern about economic growth going forward. I'm quite bullish on President Trump's agenda and what it'll mean for economic growth, not just in the United States, in the world. But we're in the middle of negotiations and all that, and so people are concerned, and that tends to lead to some pessimism. But President Trump's a master negotiator. I think we saw it in his first term, that where people had concerns and anxieties about his policies, ultimately they led to strong economic growth. I see no reason we won't have the same result here, but I think even better this time.
So you would say to the Saudi citizen, don't be pessimistic. These oil prices are going to come back up.
Well, I think global demand is going to grow faster than people think in the next few years because of better economic agreements and wider flow of investments across the world and better economic growth. But yeah, I think the outlook for Saudi Arabia is quite bright indeed. Tremendous resources that have been managed in a long-term, thoughtful fashion. Yeah, I think the outlook here is positive.
Walk me through what's happening right now in the shale industry. Is there a bottom in your mind that shale in the United States just won't be profitable anymore?
There's a portfolio of drilling locations. The best operators with the best locations have very low break-even prices. The lower quality operators that have lower quality have resources that are much lower quality, their price to break even is much higher. It's more a continuum. There's not a one price it works and one price it doesn't work. But I will say that the price at which it does work has dropped dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years. That's American technology, American innovation, American efficiency in supply chain. So the shale industry has continually reinvented itself and continued to innovate.
And in your mind, those who would say the president's putting us out of business, are they wrong?
Oh, they're wrong. They're wrong. That's concerns about short term, and that's, people always take a trend, however long that trend is, and extrapolate that trend. The world just doesn't work that way.
Talk to me a little bit about what's going to happen next when we think about Russian energy in Europe. Obviously, the United States has made a great effort to get U.S. LNG into Eastern Europe, particularly into Ukraine, for example. In your mind, is there a scenario where the president would allow cheap Russian gas back into Europe?
I can't comment on that, but certainly I'm talking to a lot of the energy leaders and ministers in Europe as well. I think there's pretty strong resolve there that, look, we hitched our wagon to Russia and it didn't work out well, and we don't have any intention of going right back to that. So I think Russian energy returning into Europe, that'll be up to the European nations, but that's probably a problematic proposition. Fortunately, the United States is rapid growth in natural gas production and rapid growth in natural gas exports. have given a security blanket for European nations, and so much room to grow, so much room to run there.
And what kind of incentives is the U.S. government giving companies and producers to get that product into Ukraine and Eastern Europe?
Yeah, fortunately, we don't need. The best thing about energy is to let price and technology and individual negotiations between parties set a marketplace. One of the concerns, I think, of the last 4 years is we saw a desire to top-down control. This energy is good, this energy is bad, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. That's not how marketplaces work. That's not how innovation works. To give that quick example, Hadley, 15 years ago, the United States was the biggest importer of natural gas on the planet. Today, we're the largest exporter of natural gas on the planet.
Some would say that the former president's team helped that.
I think it happened in spite of the former president's team, because most of the development was on private land. We certainly chilled development on federal lands. We slowed the growth in exports of natural gas under the last president. Now, American industry plowed ahead and we still had a positive result, but it could have been far more positive, It's the second largest export of the United States today, natural gas exports, liquefied natural gas, and the fastest growing export of our country.
When you take a step back and look at what the Biden team did over 4 years, obviously the Trump administration, energy dominance, a very different outlook for the future of oil and gas and other energy from the United States. In your mind, what were the things that they got wrong that you're trying to fix?
They got wrong thinking, as they said, an all-of-government approach to stop hydrocarbons, or they called it, in the interest of climate change. They didn't pursue policies that were in the interest of climate change. That the biggest reducer of greenhouse gas emissions has been the growth of natural gas. They even did a study in my Department of Energy showing increased exports of natural gas would lower greenhouse gas emissions, and so they buried that report. 4 months later, said they were going to study the issue and pause it in the meantime. They really had an anti-hydrocarbon agenda, maybe in the mistaken belief that if we oppose hydrocarbons, somehow a new energy system will magically appear. You can't hamper, hamstring, or stand in the way of the existing energy system. Let new energy technologies grow and thrive and compete in the marketplace. The world just needs a lot more energy, not less energy. They were focused on energy subtraction. We're focused on energy addition.
Tell me how you have this conversation with His Royal Highness, because essentially you have a country, Saudi Arabia, the majority of which their oil supplies go to Asian markets. The majority of that number obviously goes to China. And now with these tariffs, there's a great deal of fear that that's going to slow economic growth, and that will have a direct impact on the kingdom and on the world. In your mind, what are the next steps in order to bring the world back to profitability?
Yeah, well, number one, there's, almost every nation on the planet is reaching out to the United States and engaging in dialogues with us. The tariff question really came from two things. America's been very welcoming to imports from all around the world. All we want to do is get all the countries of the world very welcoming to American exports, to import our products just as easily as we import their products. That's good for the global economy. What you're seeing now is concerns about, is that going to work out? Yes, that's going to work out. The other agenda President Trump had with the tariffs is to reindustrialize America. We've sort of hollowed out energy-intensive, large-scale manufacturing in our country. If you're in finance or advertising or media, it hasn't rained on your parade. But for so many Americans, we've shrunk the jobs and economic opportunities for them. Think the heartland of America. President Trump is adamantly focused on bringing those jobs, that investment dollars, back into our country to reindustrialize America. That'll be great for economic growth for the world as well.
So is the message to the region, just stick with us, we're going to get those prices back to a sustainable level? Because under 60 is not good for Saudi.
Yeah, again, you're talking short-term oil prices right now. I think the message to the region absolutely is American partnership is back, it's stronger. We're not shunning your industry or not visiting you because we think you're somehow against the world interests, even though you're you're providing the energy sources that make our world go round. Our interest is America is a strong, resolute ally. American leadership is going to lead to strong economic growth, which leads to strong growth in energy demand, which is great for energy producers and for energy consumers.
There was some fear in the opening weeks of the Trump administration that the president might declare war on OPEC. Is that going to happen?
Oh, I don't see that happening at all. the nations here in the Middle East, I think, fundamentally want the same thing we want, which is today we've got 1 billion people that live nice, wonderful, energized lives like you and I do. We have 7 billion people that wish they lived that way. The only way to have those 7 billion people live like you and I is just massively more energy in the world. And to get massively more energy, you have to make long-term, multi-decadal investments in energy production and energy infrastructure and transport to bring that energy around the world. That was frozen for the last 4 years. You know, there's all this attempt that we're going to shame the world into stop growing their consumption of energy. Those 7 billion people just shouldn't deserve lives like us. That's just shameful, and that's just wrong. I'm seeing nothing but optimism on my visits here in the Middle East. That sort of common sense has returned to the United States. We're pro-energy, we're pro-prosperity at home, and pro-peace abroad. That's a pretty positive agenda.
Iran talks just taking place over the weekend in Oman. The readout has been, at least from the U.S. side, that these were constructive conversations. In your mind, does that rule out the possibility that the United States could sanction Iranian crude?
I'd say way too early to tell, way too early to tell. We had 4 years of let's appease Iran, you know, let's just ask them to be better actors and not enforce the sanctions that were already in place when the last administration came in. And what happened? Iranian oil exports surged. With the standing in the way of energy, we also had higher prices, higher exports, lots of money. You've seen what's happened with Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and a rapid acceleration of the Iranian nuclear program. None of those were good results. Now we have a strong, firm leadership in the United States that's, again, pro-prosperity, pro-peace, and a very firm line on Iran that is just not acceptable, not just for the Middle East, but for the world, to have a nuclear-armed Iran. Strong, resolute leadership in alignment with our allies is going to lead to that positive outcome. We don't know exactly how that'll unfold, but we're not going to tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran.
Yeah, and Russian oil prices this low, not great for the president's war machine. In your mind, is that just an added bonus of the current price fluctuations?
Yeah, well, a key for President's agenda as well is peace in Russia and Ukraine. What a murderous war. We haven't seen a war on that scale for a long time. And the best result for everyone is to get that to come to an end. Yeah, but is there pressure on President Putin? He lost his largest export market for natural gas to Europe. He's got lower oil prices. He's become a pariah around the world. I think it's in Russia's best interest to get to a peace agreement as well. Certainly it's in Ukraine's interest, certainly it's in Russia's interest, and it's in the interest of Europe and the world.
Mr. Secretary, it's wonderful to have you here in Riyadh. Thank you for joining us.
Hadley, thanks for having me.